The morning sun painted golden streaks across the tall windows of Westfield Primary School as 28 excited 8-year-olds gathered in the main hallway. Today wasn't just another ordinary Tuesday. Today was the day they had all been waiting for since the beginning of the school year. They were going to visit Buckingham Palace, the home of the royal family. Little Lily bounced on her toes, clutching her small backpack tightly. She had packed her favorite notebook to write down everything she would see. Her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, had told them they would learn about history, see beautiful paintings, and maybe even spot a royal guard in their famous red uniform and tall black hat. Lily's eyes sparkled with wonder as she imagined walking through the same halls where kings and queens had lived for hundreds of years. The school bus ride felt like forever. Lily pressed her nose against the cool window, watching London's busy streets blur past. Double-decker buses rumbled alongside them, and people hurried along the sidewalks with their morning coffee. Her best friend Sophie sat next to her, chattering excitedly about all the things they might see. Behind them, Tommy and Ben were arguing about whether the guards were allowed to smile or if they had to stay serious all the time. When the massive iron gates of Buckingham Palace finally came into view, a collective gasp rose from the children. The palace looked even bigger than in the pictures they had studied in class. Its cream-colored walls stretched endlessly, and hundreds of windows gleamed in the sunlight like watching eyes. Lily felt her heart skip a beat. This was really happening. Their tour guide, a friendly woman with a warm smile, led them through the entrance. She explained how they must stay together as a group, walk quietly, and definitely not touch anything. The children nodded eagerly, too amazed by their surroundings to cause any trouble. The first room they entered took Lily's breath away. The ceiling seemed to reach up to the clouds, decorated with golden designs that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung above their heads like frozen fireworks, casting tiny rainbows on the walls when the light hit them, just right. Lily had never seen anything so beautiful. She pulled out her notebook and tried to draw what she saw, but her pencil couldn't capture the magic of being there in person. The guide told them about royal dinners where hundreds of people would eat together in rooms filled with flowers and candles. As they moved from room to room, Lily found herself walking slower and slower, trying to take in every detail. The other children moved ahead with Mrs. Henderson and the guide, their voices echoing softly in the grand hallways. There were so many things to look at. Paintings of serious-looking people in fancy clothes lined the walls. Some of the men wore uniforms covered in medals, while the women wore beautiful dresses with jewels that seemed to catch every bit of light. In one room, Lily stopped completely. A massive painting showed a scene of horses and riders in what looked like an important battle from long ago. She stepped closer, trying to count all the horses, when she realized something that made her stomach drop. The voices of her classmates were getting fainter and fainter. She looked around quickly, but the doorway where her group had been standing just moments before was now empty. Panic started to creep up her throat like a cold hand. She rushed to the doorway and looked down the long hallway in both directions. Which way had they gone? Everything looked the same. Long corridors with red carpets, paintings on every wall, and doorways leading to more rooms than she could count. Her small voice called out for Mrs. Henderson, but it seemed to disappear into the vastness of the palace. Lily chose to go right, walking quickly but trying not to run. Her footsteps sounded loud on the polished floors, and she worried someone might tell her to be quiet. She passed room after room, each one beautiful but empty of her classmates. Her notebook, which had felt so important this morning, now seemed heavy in her hands. All she wanted was to see Sophie's familiar face or hear Tommy's loud laugh. The hallways seemed to go on forever. Some led to staircases that curved up to floors she wasn't supposed to visit. Others opened into rooms that looked too fancy and important for a school group. Lily noticed signs on some of the walls, but the words were too big for her to understand completely. She could make out private and restricted, which made her worry even more. Had she wandered into a part of the palace where children weren't allowed? Her heart was beating so fast now that she could hear it in her ears. She thought about her mom, who always told her what to do if she ever got lost in a store. Find someone who works there and ask for help, her mother would say. But who worked in a palace? And what if they were angry that she had gotten separated from her group? Just as Lily was starting to feel tears build up behind her eyes, she heard footsteps behind her. Relief flooded through her body. It had to be Mrs. Henderson coming to find her, or maybe one of the palace workers who had noticed a lost little girl. She turned around with a smile, ready to explain that she had just stopped to look at a painting and gotten left behind. But the person walking toward her wasn't Mrs. Henderson. It wasn't a palace worker in a uniform either. It was a man in a dark suit, and something about the way he was looking at her made Lily's relief disappear instantly. His eyes weren't kind like the tour guide's had been. They were focused on her in a way that made her skin feel cold, like when she had a bad dream and couldn't wake up. The man wasn't hurrying like someone who was trying to help a lost child. He was walking steadily, purposefully, as if he had been looking for her specifically. Lily remembered seeing him earlier during their tour, standing near the back of the group that had gathered to hear about the palace's history. She had noticed him because he seemed out of place, not dressed like the other tourists with their cameras and guidebooks, and not wearing the uniform of someone who worked there. Now he was alone with her in this empty hallway, and every instinct in her 8-year-old body was screaming that something was very wrong. Her father had always taught her to trust her feelings when something didn't seem right. If someone makes you uncomfortable, he had said, don't worry about being polite. Your safety is more important than hurting someone's feelings. The man was getting closer now, and Lily could see that he was smiling. But it wasn't a friendly smile like the ones she got from her teachers or neighbors. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind that made her think of the wolves in fairy tales who pretended to be nice before they showed their teeth. Lily's hands started to shake as she gripped her notebook tighter. She was lost in one of the biggest buildings in London, separated from everyone who was supposed to keep her safe, and now a stranger who made her feel scared was walking toward her with that terrible smile on his face. Lily's feet felt frozen to the marble floor as the man in the dark suit continued walking toward her. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, each sound making her heart beat faster. She wanted to call out for help, but her voice seemed stuck in her throat like when she had nightmares and couldn't scream. The beautiful palace that had felt so magical just minutes ago now felt like a maze with no way out. "Hello there, little one," the man said, his voice trying to sound friendly but somehow making Lily feel even more scared. "Are you lost? I can help you find your group." But something about the way he said it didn't sound right. When grown-ups really wanted to help, they usually kept their distance and asked questions like, "What's your teacher's name?" Or "Where did you last see your class?" This man was still walking toward her, getting closer with each step, and his eyes kept looking around as if he was making sure no one else was watching. Lily's father had taught her about stranger danger, but he had also taught her something else that most kids didn't know. Her dad had been a soldier before she was born, and he had learned things about staying safe that he thought might help his daughter someday. One of the most important lessons was this: if someone gives you a bad feeling, don't wait to find out if you're right. Trust your instincts and get away as fast as you can. Right now, every part of Lily's body was telling her to run. She took a step backward, then another. The man noticed, and his fake smile got a little wider. "Don't be afraid," he said. But now, he was moving faster too. "I just want to help you get back to your friends." That's when Lily turned and ran. Her small legs carried her as fast as they could down the long hallway. Behind her, she could hear the man's footsteps getting louder and quicker. He had stopped pretending to walk slowly. The sound of his shoes hitting the marble floor echoed off the high ceilings like thunder, and Lily knew without looking back that he was chasing her. Her backpack bounced against her back as she ran, and her notebook fell from her hands, pages scattering across the beautiful red carpet. She didn't stop to pick it up. Nothing mattered now except getting away from the man who was following her. Her breathing came in short, scared gasps, and she could taste tears on her lips, even though she didn't remember starting to cry. The hallways of Buckingham Palace seemed to stretch on forever. Lily ran past doorway after doorway, each one leading to rooms she couldn't see into. Some doors were closed, others were open but dark inside. She thought about ducking into one of the rooms to hide. But what if it was a dead end? What if there Was nowhere to go from there. At least in the hallway she could keep running. Her legs were starting to hurt and she could hear her own heartbeat loud in her ears. The man's footsteps behind her sounded closer now, and she was terrified to think about what would happen if he caught up to her. She had never been so scared in her entire 8 years of life, even when she had gotten lost in the supermarket. When she was 5, she had never felt this kind of fear that made her whole body shake. As she ran around a corner, Lily almost slipped on the polished floor. She grabbed onto the wall to steady herself, and for just a second she looked back. The man was there, maybe 20 steps behind her, and he wasn't even trying to look friendly anymore. His face was serious and determined, like he was focused on a job he had to finish. Seeing him so close made Lily find energy she didn't know she had, and she pushed herself to run even faster. The palace seemed like a different place now than it had during the tour. Then, it had been full of wonder and beauty. Now, it felt like a scary castle from a movie with endless corridors and shadows where bad things could happen. The paintings on the walls seemed to watch her run past, and the fancy furniture looked like obstacles that might trip her up if she wasn't careful. Lily's chest was burning from running so hard, and her legs felt wobbly. She didn't know how much longer she could keep going. The man behind her was bigger and stronger, and she was just a little girl. In her mind, she could hear her father's voice teaching her about being brave. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, he had told her once. It means you do what you need to do even when you are scared. Right now, what she needed to do was find help. But where? She had been running for what felt like forever, and she hadn't seen a single other person. No tourists with cameras, no palace workers, no security guards. Just empty hallways and the sound of the man chasing her getting closer and closer. Then, as she rounded another corner, something caught her eye that made her heart jump with hope. At the end of this hallway, standing perfectly still like a statue, was a figure in a bright red uniform, a royal guard. She had seen them in pictures and movies, and Mrs. Henderson had told the class all about them during their lessons about the palace. The guard stood at attention next to a doorway, holding his rifle straight up beside him. His tall black hat made him look even taller, and his red jacket was covered with shiny buttons that caught the light. His face looked serious and focused, staring straight ahead like guards were supposed to do. Lily had heard that these guards were trained never to move or speak while they were on duty, no matter what happened around them. But this guard was a grown-up, and grown-ups were supposed to help children who were in trouble, right? Even if he wasn't supposed to move. Surely he would help a scared little girl who was being chased by a stranger. Lily's father had always told her that soldiers and guards were the good guys, people whose job it was to protect others. As she got closer to the guard, running as fast as her tired legs could carry her, Lily could hear the man behind her breathing hard from chasing her. He was close, too close, and she was running out of hallway. In just a few more seconds, he would be able to reach out and grab her. The guard was her only hope now. But what if he really wasn't allowed to help? What if he had to stay still, no matter what? Lily's mind raced as fast as her feet. She needed to find a way to make the guard understand that she was in real danger, that this wasn't just a game or a misunderstanding. That's when she remembered something else her father had taught her, something that most people didn't know about. It was a special signal, a way that people in the military communicated when they couldn't speak out loud. Her dad had shown it to her as a game, but he had also made sure she understood it was something very serious that she should only use if she was ever in real trouble, the kind of trouble she was in right now. Lily's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst as she ran toward the royal guard. Her legs felt like jelly, and each breath burned in her chest, but she pushed herself to keep going. Behind her, the man's footsteps were getting louder and closer. She could almost feel him reaching out to grab her, and the thought made her run even faster than she knew was possible. The guard stood like a statue at the end of the hallway, his bright red uniform a splash of color against the cream-colored palace walls. Everything about him looked perfect and official, from his shiny black boots to the tall fuzzy hat on his head. His rifle stood straight beside him, and his eyes stared ahead without blinking. He looked exactly like the guards in all the pictures Lily had seen, the ones that tourists loved to take photos with because they never moved or smiled. As she got closer, Lily could see the guard's face more clearly. He looked young, maybe like her older cousin who had joined the army last year. His jaw was set in a serious line, and his eyes were focused straight ahead like he was looking at something far away that no one else could see. Mrs. Henderson had told their class that these guards were trained to stay perfectly still, no matter what happened around them. They weren't supposed to talk to tourists or react to anything, even if someone tried to make them laugh or get angry. But surely he would help a child in danger, wouldn't he? Lily was only a few steps away from the guard now, and she could hear the man behind her breathing heavily. His footsteps sounded different now, slower but more determined, like he knew she was running out of places to go. The hallway ended just past where the guard was standing, with only a wall and another doorway that might be locked. If the guard didn't help her, she would be trapped. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she stopped right in front of the tall soldier. Up close, he looked even more impressive and serious. His red jacket had rows of shiny gold buttons, and there were stripes on his sleeves that probably meant something important. The rifle beside him was taller than Lily herself, and it looked very official and scary. This was a real soldier, someone whose job it was to protect important people and places. "Please," Lily whispered, looking up at the guard's face. "Please help me, there's a man chasing me and I'm scared." The guard's eyes didn't move. He continued staring straight ahead as if Lily wasn't even there. For a moment, her heart sank. Maybe the stories were true. Maybe these guards really couldn't help anyone, no matter what was happening. But then Lily remembered something her father had taught her during one of their weekend games. He had been showing her different ways that soldiers communicated when they couldn't speak out loud, like when they were on secret missions or needed to be very quiet. Most of the signals were too complicated for a little girl to remember, but there was one special signal that her father had made sure she understood completely. "This one is very important, sweetheart," her dad had said, his voice more serious than usual. "This signal means that a child is in immediate danger. It's something that any soldier or police officer would recognize no matter what country they're from or what language they speak. But you must never use it unless you're really truly in trouble, do you understand?" Lily had nodded solemnly, practicing the signal until her father was satisfied she had it right. It seemed like just another game at the time, but now she realized her dad had been preparing her for exactly this kind of situation. He had been a soldier himself, and he knew that sometimes children needed ways to ask for help when words weren't enough. The signal was simple but specific. 3 quick taps on the left shoulder with the right hand, followed by pointing directly at the source of danger. Her father had explained that it was based on old military codes that meant child in distress and threat identified. It was something that anyone with military training would recognize instantly, even if they were supposed to be standing guard and not supposed to move. Behind her, Lily could hear the man's footsteps getting closer. She didn't dare turn around to look, but she could sense him approaching. Her time was running out. If the guard couldn't or wouldn't help her, she didn't know what would happen next. The thought made her feel sick and dizzy, but it also made her more determined to try everything she could think of. Taking a deep breath, Lily lifted her right hand and tapped her left shoulder 3 times, quickly, but clearly. Tap, tap, tap. Then, without turning around, she pointed behind her toward where she could hear the man's approaching footsteps. The gesture felt awkward and strange, like she was performing in a school play, but she made sure to do it exactly the way her father had taught her. For a moment, nothing happened. The guard continued staring ahead, and Lily felt her hopes crashing down around her. Maybe her father's signal only worked with certain kinds of soldiers. Maybe royal guards were trained differently. Maybe she had done it wrong because she was so scared and shaking. But then, something changed in the guard's eyes. It was tiny, almost impossible to see, but Lily caught it because she was staring at his face so desperately. His eyes shifted just for a split second to look at her. Then they moved to look behind her where she had been pointing. When his gaze returned to staring straight ahead, there was something different about his expression. He looked more alert, more focused, like a cat that had heard a mouse in the wall. Lily realized she was holding her breath. Had he understood? Did he recognize the signal? She repeated it once more, making sure her movements were clear and precise. 3 taps on her left shoulder, then pointing behind her toward the approaching danger. This time she was sure she saw the guard's jaw tighten slightly, and his grip on his rifle seemed to shift just a tiny bit. The man behind her was very close now. Lily could hear him trying to control his breathing, probably getting ready to speak to her again or maybe to grab her. The sound made her whole body shake with fear, but she forced herself to stay focused on the guard. If her father's signal was going to work, it had to work now. "There you are, little girl," came the man's voice from right behind her. "I've been looking everywhere for you. Your teacher sent me to find you." But Lily knew that was a lie. Mrs. Henderson would never send a stranger to look for a student, especially not someone who had been following her through empty hallways. Her father had taught her that bad people often pretended to be helping when they were actually trying to hurt someone. The guard was still standing perfectly still, but now Lily was sure he was listening to every word. She could see a tiny muscle in his cheek twitching like he was clenching his teeth. His breathing seemed different too, more controlled, like he was getting ready for something. "Come on now," the man continued, and Lily felt his hand touch her shoulder. "Let's go find your class." That touch sent a jolt of pure terror through Lily's body. This was it. This was the moment when everything would either be okay or go terribly wrong. She looked up at the guard's face one more time, hoping with every fiber of her being that he had understood her signal, and that he cared enough about a scared little girl to break the rules that said he had to stand still no matter what. The moment the man's hand touched Lily's shoulder, everything changed. It was as if someone had flipped a switch inside the Royal Guard. 1 second he was standing perfectly still like a statue, and the next second he was moving with the speed and purpose of a trained soldier who had just recognized a threat. Guard Thompson had been standing at his post for nearly 2 hours that morning, just like he did every day. He had learned to block out the sounds of tourists walking by, the clicking of cameras, and even the occasional attempts by visitors to make him smile or react. His training had taught him that his job was to protect the palace and maintain the dignity of his position, no matter what distractions occurred around him. But when the little girl had made that signal, everything his military instructors had ever taught him came flooding back. 3 taps to the left shoulder followed by pointing at a threat. It was a distress signal used by military families, something taught to children of soldiers and police officers as a last resort when they couldn't call for help in normal ways. Thompson had learned about it during his army training before joining the Royal Guard, and he had never forgotten it. The moment he saw that signal, his mind started working like the soldier he had been trained to be. He listened carefully to the man's words, analyzing everything about the situation. The man claimed to be looking for the girl on behalf of her teacher, but something about his story didn't add up. Real school staff would have contacted palace security immediately if a child was missing. They would have been accompanied by other adults, and they certainly wouldn't have been chasing a frightened child through restricted areas of the palace. More importantly, Thompson had noticed the man earlier during the school tour. While the children and their teacher had been listening to the guide's explanations, this man had been standing at the back of the group, watching the children more than listening to the historical information. His behavior had seemed odd at the time, but now it made perfect sense. He hadn't been there as a tourist at all. When the man put his hand on the girl's shoulder and she flinched away from his touch, Thompson made a decision that would change everything. Every rule of his position told him to stay at his post. Royal Guards were famous around the world for their ability to remain motionless and silent, no matter what happened around them. Breaking that tradition was serious enough to end his career. But Thompson had been a soldier before he became a Royal Guard, and soldiers had a higher duty than following rules. They had a duty to protect innocent people, especially children, from those who would hurt them. And right now, every instinct he had developed during his years of military service was telling him that this little girl was in real danger. "Stop, right there," Thompson commanded, his voice echoing through the hallway with the authority of someone who had spent years learning how to take control of dangerous situations. The man jumped back, clearly startled by the sudden sound. He had probably expected the guard to remain silent like they always did. His eyes went wide with surprise and something else that looked like panic. For a moment, he just stood there with his mouth open, trying to figure out what to do next. Thompson stepped forward, placing himself directly between the man and the frightened child. His movement was smooth and controlled, but there was no mistaking the threat in his posture. Even without his rifle raised, he looked like exactly what he was, a trained soldier who was prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect someone in danger. "I said stop," Thompson repeated, his voice even louder and more commanding than before. "Take your hands off the child and step back." The man tried to recover his composure, forcing what he probably thought was a friendly smile. "Oh, thank goodness," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I've been looking everywhere for my daughter. She got separated from her school group and I've been so worried." But Thompson had been trained to read people, and everything about this man screamed danger. His story was full of holes. If this was really his daughter, why had she been so terrified of him? Why had she made a military distress signal? And most importantly, why was he in a restricted area of the palace instead of going to the proper authorities for help? "What's your daughter's name?" Thompson asked, his eyes never leaving the man's face. The man hesitated for just a second too, long. Her name is Lucy," he said finally. Thompson looked down at Lily, who was now standing safely behind him. "Is that your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently, his voice completely different when speaking to the child. Lily shook her head quickly, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "My name is Lily," she whispered. "And he's not my daddy. I don't know who he is, but he was chasing me and it scared me really bad." That was all Thompson needed to hear. He reached for the radio attached to his belt, never taking his eyes off the man, who was now starting to look around as if searching for an escape route. "Palace Security, this is Guard Post 7. I need immediate backup in the East Wing, 2nd floor. Suspicious individual approaching a minor child." The man's face changed completely when he heard Thompson calling for backup. The fake friendly expression disappeared, replaced by something much more dangerous. "You don't understand," he said, his voice getting harder. "She's confused. She's just scared because she got lost. I'm trying to help her." "If you're trying to help," Thompson replied calmly, "then you won't mind waiting here until security arrives to sort this out. Real parents are always happy to prove their identity when their children are involved." But the man didn't want to wait for security. He took a step toward Thompson, his hands clenched into fists. "You're making a big mistake, guard. Do you know how much trouble you're going to be in for leaving your post?" Thompson almost smiled at that. He had been in real trouble before, in places where the stakes were much higher than his job. He had been shot at by people who were actually dangerous, not just predators who targeted children. This man might scare an 8-year-old girl, but he didn't scare a trained soldier. "The only mistake here," Thompson said, his voice steady and confident, "is you thinking you could hurt a child on my watch." The sound of running footsteps echoed through the hallway as palace security responded to Thompson's call. Within seconds, 3 security officers appeared around the corner, their radios crackling with communication and their faces serious with purpose. They took in the scene quickly. The royal guard standing protectively in front of a young girl and a man who looked like he very much wanted to be anywhere else. "What's the situation?" asked the lead security officer, a woman with short gray hair and the kind of presence that suggested she had dealt with every type of problem imaginable. Thompson quickly explained what he had observed, including the girl's distress signal and the man's suspicious behavior. As he spoke, Lily stayed close behind him, finally feeling safe for the first time since she had gotten separated from her school group. The man tried one more time to convince everyone that he was just a concerned parent, but his story fell apart completely when the security officers asked for identification and proof of his relationship to the child. He had no school documents, no contact information for Lily's parents, and no reasonable explanation for why he had been following a frightened child through restricted areas of the palace instead of seeking help from official channels. As the security officers took the man into custody, Thompson knelt down to Lily's level. His serious guard expression had been replaced by the kind, gentle look of someone who understood how scary the world could sometimes be for a little girl. "You did exactly the right thing," he told her softly. That signal you made, where did you learn it? My daddy taught me, Lily replied, wiping tears from her cheeks. He said to use it if I was ever in real trouble and needed help from a soldier or police officer. Thompson nodded approvingly. Your dad sounds like a very smart man. That signal probably saved your life today. The next few hours felt like a whirlwind to Lily. Palace security officers gently led her to a comfortable office where a kind woman named Officer Martinez gave her a warm cup of hot chocolate and sat with her while they waited for her parents to arrive. The office had big windows overlooking the palace gardens, and Lily found herself staring out at the peaceful scene, still hardly believing everything that had just happened. Mrs. Henderson arrived first, her face pale with worry and relief. She had been frantically searching the palace with the tour guide when security contacted her about the missing student. Behind her came Lily's parents, who had raced across London the moment they got the call from the school. Her mother scooped her up in the biggest hug Lily had ever received, and her father knelt down to look into her eyes with the serious expression he used when something was really important. You remembered the signal, he said quietly, his voice full of pride and emotion. You remembered exactly what I taught you, and you used it when you needed it most. That took real courage, sweetheart. Lily nodded, still feeling a bit shaky from everything that had happened. The guard understood it, Daddy, just like you said he would. He protected me. While Lily was being reunited with her family, Guardy, Thompson was facing the consequences of his decision to break protocol. His commanding officer, Colonel Harrison, had arrived at the palace to investigate why one of his guards had abandoned his post during duty hours. Breaking protocol as a royal guard was a serious matter that could result in immediate dismissal from the service. Thompson stood at attention in the colonel's temporary office, his uniform still perfect despite everything that had happened. He knew he might lose his job, but he also knew he would make the same choice again if faced with the same situation. Some things were more important than rules, even important rules like the ones that governed the Royal Guard. Explain to me, Thompson, Colonel Harrison said sternly, why you thought it was appropriate to leave your assigned position during active duty. Thompson took a deep breath and told his story. He explained about seeing the little girl make the military distress signal, about recognizing the suspicious behavior of the man who had been following her, and about his training as a soldier before joining the Royal Guard. He spoke clearly and honestly, taking full responsibility for his decision while explaining the reasoning behind it. Colonel Harrison listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Thompson finished speaking, there was a long moment of silence that felt like it lasted forever. Finally, the colonel spoke. You realize that maintaining position is one of the most fundamental requirements of your role? That tourists come from around the world specifically to see guards who never break character or abandon their posts? Yes, sir, Thompson replied. I understand the gravity of what I did. What Thompson didn't know was that while he was being questioned, a thorough investigation was already underway about the man who had been chasing Lily. Palace security had discovered some very disturbing information about him. His name was David Crawford, and he had a criminal history that made everyone involved in the case feel sick to their stomachs. Crawford had been arrested twice before for approaching children in public places, though he had never been convicted, due to lack of evidence. Security cameras from around London showed that he had been following children at tourist attractions for weeks, always careful to stay just on the legal side of the law. Until today, when he had finally crossed the line by actually pursuing a child through the palace. More disturbing still, investigators found that Crawford had been specifically targeting school groups visiting famous landmarks around London. He had learned the schedules of various schools and had been showing up at their field trips, looking for opportunities to get children alone. The palace visit had been perfect for his plans because the building was so large and had so many isolated areas where a child could become separated from their group. Detective Williams, who was leading the investigation, realized that Thompson's quick action had likely prevented something terrible from happening. If the guard had followed protocol and remained at his post, Crawford might have succeeded in taking Lily to a secondary location, where the outcome could have been much worse. 3 days after the incident, Colonel Harrison called Thompson back to his office. This time, the meeting was very different. Also present were Detective Williams, the head of Palace Security, and several high-ranking officials who rarely got involved in individual cases. Thompson, Colonel Harrison began. The investigation into this incident has revealed some important facts that change how we view your actions. The colonel explained that Crawford had been charged with attempted kidnapping, and that evidence suggested he had been planning to harm Lily. Security footage from throughout the palace showed clearly that Lily had been running in fear while Crawford pursued her with obvious intent. Most importantly, experts had confirmed that the military distress signal Lily had used was a legitimate emergency communication that any trained soldier should recognize and respond to. Your quick thinking and willingness to put a child's safety above protocol likely prevented a serious crime, Detective Williams added. Crawford has confessed to planning to take the girl out of the palace through a service entrance he had scouted earlier. If you hadn't intervened when you did, we might be dealing with a much more tragic situation. Thompson felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he remained standing at attention. He still didn't know whether he would keep his job, and he was prepared for whatever decision his superiors made. Colonel Harrison stood up from behind his desk, his expression becoming more formal. Thompson, the Royal Guard has a tradition that goes back hundreds of years. That tradition is built on discipline, honor, and unwavering commitment to duty. But above all, it is built on the principle of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The colonel paused, looking directly at Thompson. What you did 3 days ago embodied the highest ideals of military service. You recognized a threat, you assessed the situation correctly, and you took appropriate action to protect an innocent child. While your methods were unconventional, your judgment was sound and your courage was exemplary. Thompson couldn't believe what he was hearing. Instead of being disciplined, he was being praised for his actions. Furthermore, Colonel Harrison continued, this incident has prompted us to review our protocols regarding emergency situations involving children. We are implementing new training that will teach all guards how to recognize distress signals like the one used by the young girl. We are also establishing clear guidelines for when breaking standard protocol is not only acceptable, but required. 2 weeks later, Lily and her family returned to Buckingham Palace for a very special visit. This time they weren't part of a school tour. They had been personally invited by the palace administration to meet with Guard Thompson and to participate in a small ceremony recognizing his actions. Lily wore her best dress for the occasion, and she carried a handmade card she had created for the guard who had saved her. The card had a drawing of a soldier in a red uniform with the words, "Thank you for protecting me," written in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. When they met Thompson in the same hallway where everything had happened, he wasn't in his guard uniform. Instead, he wore his dress uniform with all his military medals, looking every bit the decorated soldier he was. But when he saw Lily, his serious expression melted into a warm smile. "Hello again," he said, kneeling down to her level just like he had that scary day. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," Lily replied, though she stayed close to her parents. "Thank you for helping me. My daddy says you're a real hero." Thompson shook his head gently. "You're the hero, Lily. You remembered your training, you stayed brave even when you were scared, and you found a way to ask for help. Those are the actions of a true hero." The ceremony was small but meaningful. Palace officials presented Thompson with a commendation for his service, and Lily's story became part of the training materials used to teach new guards about emergency protocols. Most importantly, Crawford was sentenced to several years in prison, ensuring that he couldn't hurt any other children. As they prepared to leave the palace that day, Lily's father shook Thompson's hand with deep gratitude. "Thank you for listening," he said simply. "Thank you for understanding what that signal meant and for caring enough to act on it." Thompson nodded, understanding the weight of that thanks. "It's what any good soldier would have done," he replied. "But I'm grateful that Lily knew how to ask for help in a way I could understand." The story of the little girl and the Royal Guard spread quietly through military and law enforcement communities, serving as a powerful reminder about the importance of teaching children how to communicate danger and training adults how to recognize when those communications occur. It became a story about preparation, quick thinking, and the courage to do what's right even when it means breaking the rules. Most importantly, it became a story about how a father's love and a soldier's training came together at exactly the right moment to keep a little girl safe from someone who meant to hurt her.